Hello, everyone. This is the Blockchain Socialist, and you're listening to another new episode. And today I'm doing an interview with Chibu Ichiban, a founding member of a future modern network of cooperatives, which is delivering liberation tech to the masses through art, culture, and basic services. Hey, Chibu, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. So the Future Modern Cooperative is a pretty interesting project that I've come across, and I was curious to hear from you. Maybe you can explain a bit what it is and what got you started on it.
Yeah, so basically I wanted to create a movement that would move us towards a more democratic society by kind of working the levers that I felt like the working class had the most kind of leverage on. So, when I look at the way the economy is set up, it's like you have certain industries where the people who, well, really in any industry, the people who create the value aren't really the ones that get to keep it. But certain um, you have certain industries, especially in like the creative economies, like knowledge economies, these kind of things that have the ability to much more readily create a different system because of the internet and because of technology that we have, or just because of inherently how they work. It doesn't necessarily take a lot of this sort of upstart capital. So like, for instance, if you're like an artist or if you're a researcher, or you're a musician, it's kind of like you can create a lot of value just with yourself. And also, these people tend to be like marginalized, and those industries tend to have a lot of like social influence. So it's like if we could get certain industries to work in a more cooperative manner, and if we could kind of make sure that uh, these marginalized communities that kind of have this social power are empowered by technology to be able to kind of lead those industries, then we could uh, essentially set up a model that people could look at and say, this is what we're like exiting to.
Right.
So go
So it's
ahead.
like using areas which aren't so capital intensive. Things like, I mean, art. You don't need $1 million loan to get up and running to make art.
Right. Or just things that are kind of inherently just decentralized. I mean, you could there are things like sex work or like the cannabis industry where it's kind of like marginalized people aren't allowed to make money or like work in society in sort of these more traditional and prestigious ways, so they have to get it kind of on the edges. But then it's like those edge ways of making money become mainstream and then sort of like get co-opted from those like marginalized people who were like basically the ones that like kept it around and like legitimized it in the first place. So like it could even be uh like one thing that we want to do is like create a lobby for Black owned weed businesses and basically set it up to where if we're going to like legalize weed, we need to have like 50% of the employees at these companies be like Black or Indigenous people, and that needs to be like at every like level of the business. It can't just be like the entry level people or like where you fill those roles at. So I think we're interested in like attacking it from different angles, but like really kind of seeing like what those influential markets and kind of communities and societies are, that if we were to decentralize and sort of democratize that, it would act as both like a model of influence and like like a bargaining chip, and like politically and power wise, to be able to make the changes that we want to see in society.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point about at least the marijuana business. From what I've read, is that something like 90+% of weed business owners are all white, even though the vast majority of the people who are in jail for possession of marijuana are people of color.
Right. And it's like there is energy around kind of the racial justice aspect of legalizing weed, which is obviously like a great argument. But if we want to build a coalition that would actually be able to get this done, that's like greater than just like the quote unquote SJWs, there's different arguments for it, right? Like you can look at it from like an economic stimulus perspective. Like basically I'm working on like ideating this project with a friend of mine who I actually met through his music, but he was in pharmacy school at the time, and like now he's a pharmacy doctor and he works in like pharmacy marketing and policy. So he's basically drafting up the reports and proposals that are going out to like the FDA and like hospitals and these kind of like institutions to sell and approve drugs. So he kind of sees exactly how that kind of like wheeling and dealing goes on behind the scenes. And he was essentially telling me that he was reading this report that said like because he's from New York, and he said if and when weed is legalized in New York, that 40% of the jobs in New York will be in the cannabis industry. So you're talking about like a huge potential economic boom, potential to provide jobs to millions and millions of people if this happens. And then you also have the kind of healthcare, public health policy aspect of it, where cannabis responds favorably to more symptoms and more ailments than pretty much any other substance. So that's a huge threat to big pharma, because once you legalize weed, it's like people don't have to like buy opioids anymore. People, wind up like not getting addicted to heroin. And it's like, that benefits everyone except for big pharma, the people who are like peddling all these prescription drugs. So then they become kind of like the big enemy to like fight against there. But it's like if you can create some sort of deal where you're sitting at a table and you can say, we work with these clients, these like Black and Indigenous owned, cooperatively owned cannabis companies. Wouldn't it be great if like when weed was legalized, we had some sort of system where like if pharma wants to get into it, like they have to meet these standards of like racial equity, but that will get you into the business. And then like we'll set up the law so that we sort of are positioned, like our clients are positioned in the best way to sort of profit when these laws go into effect. So it's like definitely being willing to like play ball in the like sort of electoral space of things, but in the meantime gaining that sort of like social and community power to where it's like we have the ability to say we need to sit down at a table because we have control over resources and essentially like the support of the people enough to be like, to have something to like give, and that the other side wants, basically.
Yeah. So A Future Modern is really it's a cooperative, but it's meant to be a larger movement meant to empower different marginalized communities, and using art as like one of the ways to sort of show how it can work.
Exactly.
So what are some of the projects that you guys are working on, and where exactly does blockchain come into all of it?
Yeah, so I feel like blockchain will probably come into every project that we work on, because it is the one thing that allows you to essentially force people to act in good behavior without using violence, right? So it's like, if you set up a system that where it's like, not only can you not do the wrong thing, but you're incentivized to do the right thing, it's like, I don't see any other way of getting us into like a global, large scale kind of cooperative mode of operation and production. So
That's assuming that like this is a blockchain that is designed to incentivize such behavior.
exactly. So yeah, the question is like incentivizing it in such a way where it's not like just a tool of speculation that like financiers use to get richer, and is actually actively distributing power to like the base, the kind of base like people in the system. So as far as projects, well, recently I've been spending a lot of time on this art blockchain project. So there's a lot of really interesting things now that you can do with blockchain to give yourself true ownership over your art in the digital space.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another thing with blockchain that ties in, is the fact that it gives you true ownership. And prior to blockchain, there actually was not a concept of true ownership. And so now that you can own something without there being a third party custodian, the possibilities for people to own their own creations and build wealth from them become, endless. So with that project, I'm really interested in how do we get these kind of new, like they call it like Web3, or just, distributed web-based projects out to the masses. And to me, it's like, well, the masses aren't going to come if the artists and the content aren't there. But if I can show the artists kind of like what the value of this is to them, and they start taking ownership of it and like buying into it, and seeing that work for them, then it's like we can create a movement where we're bringing people who aren't even really hip to blockchain, or aren't really, maybe they've heard of Bitcoin, but they don't really know like everything else that can be done with it. And at the same time, we are creating a new culture within the blockchain space where it's not, the culture isn't about the blockchain itself. That's just like something that's happening in the background that allows like real culture to like emerge and flourish. So super excited about that project. We have about 15 artists that we've started signing up for like wallets, and getting onto Cent. I don't know if you've heard of Cent, but they're a pretty cool project. So having them all like write intro posts on Cent, and then getting them into the next kind of plan is to like get them into like these art markets and these sort of art channels, like all the sort of like discords and telegrams that people are selling quote unquote crypto art in. And yeah, I was just having a talk with one of our artists yesterday or the day before, and it just went from this conversation of kind of extreme despair coming from him, someone who I've known for years, I know is extremely talented, like a seminal talent, and it's been proven too. Like this um, artist has basically curated and like mentored and developed some of the biggest kind of like underground artists in like the last 5 years. And then it's like his music is even kind of more original than theirs, and maybe isn't necessarily doesn't necessarily have the same mainstream appeal, but it's like if the same people who knew like Lil Peep, who's like an artist that he mentored, if they all knew that like Jimmy V was someone who mentored Lil Peep, and that was like actual history that like people could like easily see, I think it would be, at least some of those Lil Peep fans would have to like give him a chance, because it's like, they might have heard people talk about Jimmy V, but then, they think he's whack or whatever because he's not popular. So it's like this, or not as popular, like he definitely like has fans and gets streams, but he's not on that same level. And, most music listeners are kind of, it's like, I'm only going to give you my attention if you're already popular, because that's the only way that I know it's like worth it for me to like pay attention to you. So it becomes this cycle. And that's why that's why you have like 77% of streaming and 60% of touring goes to the top 1% of artists. And this is like already in an industry where music artists only get 11% of like all like the total profit in that is generated by the music industry itself. So it's like 89% of money that's made by music goes to managers and labels and whoever else, and then of that 11%, like 60, 70, 80% is going to the top 1% of artists. So there definitely needs to be a better way. I think there can be. I think blockchain is a way to eventually decentralize record labels, where you can just basically have like your community be your record label, and instead of selling your rights to some record company to be able to get access to marketing, you could have a situation where I can see who in my network are kind of like the people who could get my my art out to receptive ears, and essentially reward them, whether it's through pay, whether it's through like I can see through your blockchain identity that you shared this message for me, and then like 500 people like saw that, saw my song through that. So then there's a smart contract that says like, whatever money comes through this, like some amount is going to get split out to like the people that helped me put this together and sort of promote it, because that's what's happening at the end of the day anyway. It's just behind closed doors, and
well, it's not recorded.
Yeah, exactly. And basically it's centralized so that only a few people profit from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that music is like a good sort of like area where I think blockchain can be experimented with pretty safely and pretty like innovatively. I think doing something where everything is recorded so much like in other different types of industries maybe isn't a fit, but definitely in music, I think, sharing my, that I like this song from this, artist is not, I mean, it's not like a dangerous thing to it's like not a dangerous space to play in.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I feel like music is a lot more valuable than the money that um, we pay for it. It's political power, because it's a soapbox. It's a way to get a message out, not just through the music, but even just through the way that you dress, just like the way that you associate. It's a way for Black people to get representation, people to see us in a different way. Um, so I think it's really powerful if you can really build a movement around music and art, and enable that through technology. It just gives like a new seat of power.
No,
Yeah,
definitely.
so that's kind of one project that we're working on. Actually, that spans a couple projects. There's one that's like focused on art in the blockchain, and there's one that's focused on music and AI. But they'll probably work together with the AI being essentially how do you find who the people are that you need to support you, and then the blockchain being like the incentive structure that allows you to cooperate,
Mm.
and remove kind of the centralized finance structure from it. Um, so, and then we were talking about eState, which is another project that is not involved in music and art. It's involved in housing. Oh, before I go into that, should I talk about just briefly like why this came to be?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I was just I had come up with this sort of music AI project when I was in college. I was really interested in kind of like I was saying, how do we get original artists that then get buried under imitators more kind of exposure and surface those to that same kind of community that is consuming the more popular artists. And I because as a kid I was really into like finding kind of new independent or alternative or underground music, just like was tired of the fact that the radio played the same songs all the time. I was like, I know there has to be different music out there, so I like started finding music online a lot, using blogs and stuff. And then as I got older and sort of met people who actually make music, I sort of got disillusioned from the like blog space because I was meeting people who were like really talented musicians, and I was like, yo, your music is just as good as like the stuff that I'm finding on like Pigeons and Planes or like Stereo Gum or whatever. Why don't you just like submit your demo to them, and then like you can like take a year off college and like go tour or something? They're like, no, that's not how. That's like not how it works. It's not like this meritocracy where like everyone gets like a fair listen and then they just like choose completely based on the quality of the song, like who, or like the originality of the song, like who they're gonna showcase. It's very much about like who and like whether you can say like, oh, like I worked with someone that worked with someone that you worked with, and like be able to like draw those common threads. So it's like sort of getting disillusioned from that. At the same time, the kind of like Twitter was coming up, SoundCloud had just come out, so it's like these new kind of information highways where it was very it was like social media, but like a step up from that, where it was like completely public. Streams of information could come to you from kind of like anywhere. And when I once I sort of joined up, I started finding all this content that I would have never found if I was just kind of like looking at blogs, because the blogs like weren't writing about them. And I realized that like a lot of the way that I was finding these new artists or like this new content or whatever was like, I'd start off following some people I know, and then like I would see that they were like a number of them were like interacting or like following or like retweeting like someone else that I didn't know. And so after a time, it's like, okay, like those artists can sort of like co-sign this artist, or it seems like they're like these like 20 artists who like I see like in like concert with each other, just sort of like mentioned around each other all the time. So like maybe I should like, that's kind of like a community, and I should like follow all of them, and then I'll like have a better idea of like what's going on in this kind of scene as a whole. And then I was like, well, because I was learning in my like computer science classes about networks and kind of network topology and structure and economics, and how like graph theory can be applied to networks to teach you all these different things about kind of how they break down and their dynamics. And I was like, well, I could, kind of just apply this and automate the thing that I'm already doing manually, trying to kind of search the space, use algorithms to do that. And then I was like, well, people are kind of already doing that, but the way that they're doing it is like in the background, and you just see like the end result, like the end suggestion or recommendation or whatever. I thought it would be really cool if I could actually see that knowledge web itself and have the information that and the insight that was being pulled from the the AI or whatever you want to call it be like explicitly visual, so literally anyone could like understand what the insight was, and like use that to explore for new content themselves, as opposed to just kind of being spoon-fed an answer. Because when you're spoon-fed an answer and you don't know why, then of course it becomes very easy to just make sure people listen to the same kind of like stratosphere of music, and don't ever like expose themselves to like anything outside of that. So I thought it would, by instead having like a visual knowledge map of music, it would make people more comfortable branching out from what they know to what they don't know, because it would show them the connections between them. So, that was just like this idea I had, was, kind of like toying around with it for a bit. A couple years later, I wound up going to this festival called Lightning in a Bottle. It's like they call it like a transformative festival. And I guess it's like it's like, very new agey, but like the new agey kind of vibe like borrows these ideas almost from socialism, but like not like really, but like
yeah,
it's
kind
like,
of, yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah, but it's like, this idea of like community, like people would form, they called them tribes, and like, they would like come in tribes, and people would kind of have like these open like art installations, or like their camp would be like set up very like artistically, and like maybe you could just like walk around. Like it was very much more open and kind of less corporate-y than like a Coachella or like other like festivals that I'd been to. And I wound up befriending this group of people called like First Kiss Society, they called themselves. And they were this, I guess, collective, like basically a tribe that was based around tea. So they were really into like tea and like different kinds of tea, and like the different healing powers that each tea had. And they would like make tea and give it out to people. And I was like, this is really cool. Like I like the idea of people just coming together around something they care about, and like trying to make that into a service for people. But when I thought about it, and I thought about like the people I knew and like what they were into, I was like, we could do something way more grand, like not to like diss tea or whatever, but like there's like a lot that we could accomplish if we took that kind of mentality of like we're gonna like work together in solidarity to achieve this, rather than, oh, I'm just gonna like try and go like get a job at Google and that's gonna be, my story. And so, I knew what I kind of wanted this to be focused around. I was really interested in like data privacy and sort of like online autonomy and the opportunity to create a more equitable kind of system using technology. And the idea like kind of formed from there. I think, with like, at the time, and I think that after that, it's just like things kind of happen in like current events and stuff that like made people more aware of like the kind of issues that I was talking about. When I first sort of came to my friends, like talking about like, oh, like we should make a cooperative. Well, I think at first I like,
maybe it's a good time to, because I was going to ask why design this as a cooperative,
right.
and how does that, how does that internally work, the cooperative structure in like such a system, or in such a project like A Future Modern. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying this interview so far and you want to be sure that more content like this can be made, you can of course donate to my efforts through Patreon. So if you go to patreon.com/theblockchainsocialist, you can donate starting at $3 per month or more to help me out and join other patrons like Andrew, Sam, Paul, Matthew, Kendra, and the newest patron, JB. At the moment, I've spent more on this project than I've ever earned on it due to hosting costs, so any amount really helps. And in the future, I'm hoping to make more complex bits of content to help get the message that blockchain doesn't need to be used to further entrench capitalist exploitation, and we can use it to make something much better than that. So if that message resonates with you, I hope you'll help out. And if you can't help out financially, don't worry, I understand. One thing you can do to help is to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're using, or leave a review. You can as well join the different groups that are available out there. There's the Crypto Leftist subreddit and the Discord group, which are the biggest ones. Or you can follow me on Twitter at TBSocialist. But that's it from me, so let's get back to the interview with Chibu from A Future Modern.
Yeah, so exactly. I had heard of cooperatives. When I first came up with this idea, I wasn't like gung-ho on cooperatives or like, super like involved in the cooperative space at all. But I had heard of them and had, like an intellectual idea of what they were. And I just thought like, and then so I started like looking more into it, and it just sort of made sense as a way to involve, like really just sort of passionate, like dedicated people in a way that made them feel like they had ownership. Because I think like when I first came up with Area, that like music AI project I talked about, I was like, oh, I wanted like a couple people to like help me work on it. So I was like, yo, guys, let's make this company. I'm gonna have 90% equity, and like you guys are gonna have 5%. And it almost sounded ridiculous coming out of my mouth, but I was like, that's just how companies are set up, right? So like that's what
Right.
I say. And one of them was like, that's ridiculous. Like why would I do that? And I was kind of like, well, that's just kind of like how it works. And he was like, nah, like I'm not gonna do that. So I sort of had like that experience of like, yeah, I mean, that really doesn't make sense. Like there's not anyone that I would work with that I would really want to be like the boss of, you know what I mean? So it's like
I think there's like,
yeah.
I feel like it's a lot of time. Like, I think it'd be interesting to know how many people actually would have created maybe a cooperative instead if they knew, if they knew there was an alternative to like a
Right.
startup or like a normal
Right.
company. I mean, I feel like a lot of people don't naturally want to be the boss over someone necessarily.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, there was some person that I met who like went to MIT, and it was funny because like I met him at this kind of like underground hip hop bar in LA, and like his friend's shirt had like some like nerdy like spelling out of like MIT. It was like, what is it, like E over C squared for like M, and then it was like square root of -1 for I, and it was like, you know, super nerdy. And then I like looked at his shirt, I was like, oh, you went to MIT. And so it's like obviously we were like instant friends because like I like caught it. And you know, then he was telling me about like, oh, how he's really into the startup scene in LA and stuff. I was like, oh, this is my ticket. Like, you know, he's like this white dude. Like, I was like, this dude probably knows like everything and everyone about like making a startup. Like, this is, you know, how I'm gonna, you know, this is gonna be my mentor. And then like, we started talking about it, and he was like, yeah, the first thing you want to do is like set up a C corporation and like make yourself like the sole owner. And I was just like, well, yeah, I've already kind of been here, and like I know like that's not gonna be the way that we're gonna do it. So like I, you know, realized then that I needed to find kind of like a new community, or at least just like the people that were doing something more similar to what I was doing. But yeah, I think a lot of people don't know, and you know, I just known about it because you know, my interest in anarchism, and just like having debates with people about like, oh, you know, like how would we organize society without a government? So I would just like throw out, oh, you know, we just have like cooperatives, and then there would be councils. And this is just like, I haven't read like a lot of like literature or anything. This is just like me thinking like, you know, as an economist, like that's what my background is, like, you know, maybe something like that would work. And then yeah, so once I, you know, actually started building it, that's when I was like, okay, I actually need to like learn kind of like what the history of this is, like who's done this before, you know, what works, what doesn't, and you know, also kind of realize that we in ourselves are a research project, and you know, creating best practices for it in this kind of new world, especially because you know we want it to be enabled by blockchain, and we see blockchain as a way for it to be able to kind of scale and be like the next like business model of the future.
So how exactly does the cooperative work within a future modern? How like
Yeah.
is it? I imagine it's got to be a little bit different than if you're using blockchain sometimes.
Yeah, so yeah, I think that's still in flux, because I'm learning so much about not only blockchain but like also alternatives to blockchain, like basically like mutual credit systems and like the work that's been done there, and you know, working with this company called Resonate, which is another which is a cooperatively owned music streaming co-op that we're partnering with.
Who
And
I who I interviewed, Rich Jensen, the current CEO
oh yeah,
of Resonate.
I talk to Rich, you know, like once a week or more, and yeah, you know, I think in their sort of space they have like mixed feelings or like split feelings about blockchain. You know, but I think part of that is they, you know, used it before, and they see how kind of the fluctuations in the market and like the tokens can kind of, you know, mess up their operations. So I think it's important to kind of learn from that. Like I was interested in like making our company a DAO, but then it's like I look at how a DAO works, and it's basically like the amount of money you have is like the amount of votes you have, and it's just like that doesn't make sense. Like that's just
I guess how you design it, yeah, that's how a lot of them are designed currently are very unimaginative when it comes to they sort of take on just like a capitalist form.
yeah, it's just like a decentralized capitalism.
Yeah.
Um, But I would say it's pretty unimaginative. But I mean, I guess there's like a different way to do it, but then there's not necessarily the template for it. So it's like it can't necessarily be the thing we do right now because we're going to be spending all this time trying to figure it out. So I think right now, the way that's set up is just like we have different projects that are considered different cooperatives. And then there's sort of like under the Future Modern umbrella. So we have Area, which is that music, like visualized AI startup, I guess. We have Artel, which is like this art collective, blockchain art collective that I was talking about. We have eState, which is meant to be a way for blockchain to provide housing. But it rolls out in a multi-phase process because the first question is like, okay, if you want a blockchain to provide people free housing, like how do you actually acquire the housing that you're gonna then give to people? And like how do you move housing from the sort of traditional financial system into like this cooperative system? And so the program is to iteratively gain more leverage to be able to, as inexpensively and as sort of like efficiently and quickly as possible, buy back property in our neighborhoods and have them basically stewarded by like community organizers, community leaders, just marginalized groups in those neighborhoods, and then have rules for how we share it out. Some mix between sharing it to kind of people who are in the like membership group, and then like renting it out to people who are out of the membership group so that you can fund, like basically subsidize the services that you're giving to people in the membership group. And then, ideally after time, it's like we control enough of this housing that we can actually start like making demands. So that is kind of like what we're doing with that, which, this idea of like giving people housing with blockchain is a great idea. And I was just like, this is my concept of like how we would get there. And then we have, those are kind of like the three projects that are kind of initialized and we're trying to get up and running. And then there are other projects that are sort of being ideated, like having some kind of like life sciences division where we could work on things like weed legalization and making sure that's like equitable, making sure helping like farming co-ops get set up. Like we have like a lot of people with like earth systems, civil engineering, kind of like environmental engineering and science backgrounds. So mobilizing that to provide different services for the community, perhaps provide like educational experiences as well. So it's like kids can learn like how to like, it's like if you're going to take like an economics class, why isn't that economics class on like cooperative economics and like how you can work with your like classmates to create like a self-sustaining farm or like whatever it is. So that's kind of like how it's set up, and then people can kind of like move between projects. We're discussing right now if we want to be like a collective or a traditional cooperative. I think the idea is like a collective is like completely direct decision making, direct democratic decision making, and then like a cooperative that's not a collective would potentially have like a board of directors that gets elected. And we were thinking like we might have like a mix of both. Like there's a board of directors, but it's rotating. And so if you want to like have a certain position of power or like responsibility, you can like rotate into that. And And yeah, we actually just started working with a financial advisor who actually comes from, I want to say he comes from like M&A, but he comes from like a traditional finance background, but he's really interested in like cooperatives and like helping them get structured. So he's been really helpful in like figuring out like how our equity structure works, because right now we're not funded, or we have like a small amount of like angel money from one of our members, but we're applying for grants and like looking into sponsorships and potentially looking at what investment would look like. And so he's giving us tips on like how to like structure our equity, and um, how to basically set up our corporate structure, how to set up like our payout structure for our members, to be able to like maintain a healthy business while we are trying to achieve these lofty goals and visions.
Yeah. So then, I mean, it sounds like you guys are making some progress, but how would someone, like a listener right now, how would they go about maybe becoming a member of the cooperative?
Yeah, I think the first thing to do would probably just be to reach out, like follow us on our Web 2 and Web 3 spaces. We're really active on Sense, like the Hive, the Hive blogging space, as well as like like Twitter, Instagram, whatever. Actually, I guess this financial advisor that we started working with is a good example. He just reached out, essentially saying like he wants to help, and he sort of was like specifically like, here's how. And we just happened to like really need that kind of help, and I didn't and I'd been looking for people who could give us more advice on that. I talked to like another financial advisor, but he was more so on like investments and partnerships kinds of things. So like he could help us with that, but he can really help us with like how do we get like actually set up internally. And so yeah, it was sort of just like right place, right time, and like now it'll still take kind of like developing a relationship, but it would, I think it would be great if, he wound up, coming on, or at least just being an advisor in like a official capacity. I think the way that we kind of want to structure in general is like, first you would be an employee. So, you would have like a 3 month, 6 month provisional period. And then, if you still want to join and we still want you to join, then, we would have a vote. And barring any like extreme grievance that someone like brought up against you, you would then be able to join. And yeah, right now it's really project based, but I think it'll soon develop into kind of like a fully fleshed out enterprise.
Yeah. So then right now, if someone is listening and they want to take part, then they should direct message you essentially on one of
Yeah,
these.
or any of our members. We are on Keybase as well. So I'm afuturemodern on Keybase. Anyone that follows me is pretty much a member. I don't know how you like let people see your groups on Keybase, but if you message me on Keybase, I'll respond, and we can figure out how you can see the rest of the people in the team as well.
Cool.
Yeah, and we're working on a website and stuff, so then you'll be able to have more visibility into who we are. But yeah, I think if you find us on social media and start clicking around, I pretty much only retweet other people who are in the collective, so you'll start to find out who we are.
Yeah, nice. So I want to go quickly back to the e-state project that you mentioned.
Yeah.
because you mentioned that part of the goals of Future Modern and like the movement we're trying to do is like empower disenfranchised communities, and I thought eState was it's a really like material example, I think, of
Right.
helping out disenfranchised communities. So I thought maybe you can explain a bit how something like eState would help disenfranchised communities, and like maybe you can even specify which disenfranchised communities you think this would help.
Yeah, I think it would be geared towards basically Black and brown urban communities, people who are at risk of displacement by gentrification, facing rising rents. That's who we really want to target with this. And
I think this is probably especially like cogent since, I mean, at the moment with the Corona crisis, I know in the U.S. that people have lost. I think all you got was the $1,200 stimulus check, and like I think you're losing even unemployment benefits as well for a lot of people. So, and the moratorium on evictions, I think, is ending.
Yeah, nationally it is. I think in California it officially did. I don't know what the deal is in LA. It's very confusing too, because I'm reading that they extended it, but then people are saying that they did it, and it's like, it's really bad. I think what this would provide people is, first of all, a way to share information on their housing experiences, their landlord, their building. Basically review them and start attaching like a reputation and a history to them, because when you apply to rent somewhere, you have to give them your social security number, all your bank account, like your rental history, your referrals, all this info, basically everything there is to know about you. But you don't know anything about your landlord. You don't know how many people they've evicted before, like what their like statistics are on like who they've like let rent versus who they haven't. What their like rent price has been over time.
That's true. Landlords ask for a lot of information before you can rent, while you don't know jack shit about your landlord.
Right. So kind of looking to flip that on its head. And so what I like about eState is we want to set it up as a dual, like a dual power system, or a counter power system, I guess, is maybe a less encumbered word for it. Where you have members and non-members. Members are essentially seated with like community organizations, and then they can invite people to join. And those members would be the people who are allowed to make reviews, share information, make posts, and earn credits essentially for sharing that information. Meanwhile, non-members can see the information that's being posted, but not post themselves. And we're thinking that potentially there's the opportunity for them to pay for information, whether it's information that's been kept private because whoever offered it wants to make that information members only, or information that just hasn't been provided. You would be able to essentially like fundraise for that piece of information, for someone to come and fill in that piece of information. So the first step would basically be an information market for housing that was led by kind of disenfranchised communities in urban areas and in cities. And in doing that, you can first establish like a fairly priced housing market and a fairly kind of informed housing market, which I think is like a super important first step, because the real estate market is so shady. It is very discriminatory, and they jack prices up for no reason. And just being able to like show people that, I think is hugely important. We are working with this engineer who runs his own real estate development company, and he is like born in El Salvador, basically came from nothing, now like works at Department of Water and Power, basically like rags to riches story, and is really interested in like how he can use what he knows to make housing more affordable for people, and especially interested in like how tech can kind of accelerate that and enable that. So we wound up meeting just on some, like you are really into revolutionizing industries through tech. What do you got for like the real estate industry? And then, I was like, well, I have some ideas. Obviously, being able to like collectively invest in real estate, I think would, open up opportunities for wealth for people that, weren't available. But I want to hear like what you think is like the issue kind of in what issues you see in the real estate industry. And he was like, yeah, the kind of like the most egregious thing that I see is just the amount of lying, corruption, just misrepresentation of information that occurs in the real estate industry. And if you were to remove that, I feel like prices would be a lot more fair and affordable for people. And then once you have that sort of fairness, then you can layer in a lot of the things that people have already tried, and then combine with things that, in terms of like fractional investment and what have you, combine with things that people haven't tried, like providing free housing for people when new spots become available, or having like real estate development services available, so that when communities gain control of housing, they can develop them into more sustainable, more dense, more just kind of efficient buildings, and essentially quote unquote gentrify, like renew their urban environment without it causing displacement, and instead just benefiting from their communities becoming kind of more developed. That's it.
I think that makes sense. I mean, real estate is so fucked sometimes. I mean, prices. I mean, the power dynamic between a landlord and a renter is just so, I mean, obvious and egregious.
Yeah.
But so maybe to stem from that and maybe look at the broader picture, I'm curious to hear what you think the plan is for Future Modern to make socio-political change in general, and what are the long-term goals of Future Modern?
I think something like eState, something like Tree Roots, which is our kind of envisioned life sciences division. Like once you obviously like the art and the music is cool and stuff, and it's really like more of like a marketing tool, where it's like, okay, we're out here, we're cool, we're doing these big things. Okay, now we can like get into the material world and like make some real change. And I think it's like, so once you are sort of working and giving people like material goods and material wealth, then you kind of have like a bargaining chip where you can kind of start playing in the political sphere. Whether, I think it starts locally. Like I could imagine a situation where, for instance, one of our members works with this indigenous collective that has a lot of weed growing going on, but they also have like a law arm where they do like youth outreach and basically like keeping youth out of gangs and like jails and stuff. And through that, they've developed like this really solid like community network that's been going on for like 30, 40 years. And you can imagine a situation where they are they get kind of like integrated into the future modern infrastructure. We set them up with like some like blockchain, like supply chain system. Now they're like flush with cash. We use like their weed kind of proceeds to like grow food and like grow like herbal medicines, and like so they're already doing something where they have like a dispensary, and then like in the dispensary they have like a health clinic. So they're providing services that are kind of being subsidized with what they're selling. And once you're sort of doing that at scale, maybe you can start to like push boundaries a little bit, like start like growing a farm that like may not be legal technically, but it's like the entire city is behind this. So what are you necessarily going to do about it? And then, I could see like basically the end goal is to be your own like quote unquote state, or like non-state, or I guess anarchist state, where it probably wouldn't just be us, it would be a bunch of other tech enabled cooperatives, and we are sort of in this decentralized like metropolis where we have a lot of kind of like resources in common that we share with each other. I mean, at that point, we probably, even have like a security system, because we will potentially have like real enemies. What we want to be is, living in a compound, like doing experiments, making art, like growing our own food, and like giving away the surplus to, like the community, and basically that kind of like anarchist like utopia, quote unquote. That's like the 20-year 30-year plan. Kind of basically creating like a counterpower system, like a self-sufficient alternative to everything that exists right now.
I like the lofty goals. I think it's a lot of people can identify, I think, especially maybe those who listen, like wanting this type of system, and just like knowing that we can provide, we just produce so much food, so much like excess of different products that we can share with those who need it, rather than just for profit as it is now.
Yeah,
I can identify with that.
Yeah, and I think there are ways, like I'm really interested in ways that we kind of exploit the capitalist system back. Like I'm very down to like my one of our artists was saying that we should get investment and then like dissolve the company and then like make an entirely new one, like, which I don't know if I'm like if I'm like that kind of like debonair, but like I would definitely be down, like this idea of like ethical branding, or they call it ethical advertising. I have another term for it, which is brand laundering. Basically, like all these corporations have like some marketing, some budget for marketing, and it's like instead of paying all that money to like Facebook, Instagram, Google, Twitter, you could pay that money as a donation into this network and community of businesses and cooperatives and nonprofits and just like mutual aid services that we have. And then like maybe your name gets like attached to it in like fine print. And like that's like the way that you like put yourself out in the community, as opposed to just like flipping ads. So it's like, yeah, once you kind of have the ears and eyes and like attention of people, there are definitely ways where I'm willing to like take capitalist money to kind of like contribute to these goals, because we don't really have time to kind of be purists about it. It's more of like, how do we protect their influence from creeping in, which like one thing that we want to do is like have a small amount of equity that's like allowed that investors are allowed to buy, but then it doesn't give them any voting rights, which I found out that there's apparently some precedent for, because Mark Zuckerberg, because I was telling this to my friend, he was like, "Oh yeah, just like Zuckerberg," and I was like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" He was like, "Oh, like Zuckerberg is the only person with the voting rights in Facebook." I was like, "What?" Like that is crazy, but it's also not surprising. But it's like if Zuck can do that and like keep all the power for himself, then we can definitely do that and keep the power for all of our members and like the community that we service. But yeah, I mean, but I think it's something we still are looking into. There's also like potentially sponsorships or like another way of just kind of being able to keep it going. I think it's like taking like bits and chunks and pieces off of it gradually over time.
Well, this is a really interesting conversation, and the project is really interesting. I hope people can check it out. But maybe you can, for the last question, just where can people look? Where should they look to find out more about A Future Modern if they want to learn more?
I think best place right now is our Open Collective, opencollective.com/afuturemodern. We're also A Future Modern on everything, Twitter, Instagram, Sense, Hive. So I would just follow us to keep up with us. Our website will be dropping soon, so definitely follow us so you can keep up with that. I'm also on Discord and Telegram is the same thing, A Future Modern. So keybase, A Future Modern. So definitely follow us and feel free to message us. Open to discussion anytime.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot, and good luck with the project.
Thank you for having me. This was super interesting, and I was really happy to get the practice to talk about this stuff.
Anytime.
Thanks.